Well, yeah, there's no animation. We're traveling, but y'all already knew that if you watched the real pod. This is the Boko for today. It's your boy Andrew Elixir, Tom Marcio. Most of us are traveling. It's the Misplay for Game bonus content, which probably comes out. I mean, it would come out super early for members, but it'd be kind of pointless. We're gonna do our Banlist Preds whilst we wait for our special guest of the episode to show up. How's it going, gang?
Yeah, I'm all right, buddy. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing.
I probably look about like 5 frames per second because I'm on a free rental webcam, but like we take what it is. Shout out
Yeah,
to the capsule hotel I'm recording in.
it's not great on my end either. I'm in a Premiere in if the purple lights didn't give it away. But yeah, Marcio, the only person home.
Um, Being home is pretty sick. I have a busy day ahead of me. I might be going to our store's Evo Cup, and I still don't know what I'm playing. But let's talk some JP ban list. I love ban list talk. It just brings in the views.
I think
Yeah,
it's a global ban list, by the way,
yeah, I'm
I
hoping
don't.
so.
because I think it's like when they did the staggered one. So like if there's a card that we don't have yet, it'll just get banned when it gets released.
I'm hoping that I'm not expecting it to be for us. Like, I'm expecting like Bandai to do a post like a few days down the line being like this list will then apply to us or whatever, but I'm not expecting it to
Yeah,
be like effective for both regions straight away.
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah.
think
Well,
that's
like
fine.
But I think
they're doing like a
we will eventually get like a ban list. It doesn't make sense for Japan to have more cards on the ban list than us, even if they like say that like, oh, this ban list is effective from like 2 months from now or whatever, right?
yeah. I mean, the other thing is like it gets dropped like 1 week and then is available the next week. So like whatever they're gonna do, they're probably gonna have like multiple staggered dates throughout this whole thing. And
Mm-hmm.
also like between you and me, viewing audience, I actually don't think they're gonna ban that many cards that aren't already out here. So like there's like maybe one or two things people are like, that could go, but like,
Yeah, I think. I mean, we'll talk about the ban list now, but I don't think there's much point in hitting new cards. I think you can hit cards in current decks to sort of like bring them down a little bit.
yeah.
Yeah, because they've already learned
Anything
they
else
really
is like,
don't like hitting new cards because it affects product sales. Like, look at
Unless it's
15.
like, yeah, unless it's like very, very okay. To be fair, when we had the Apocalypse ban list, that one was like I think much more specific.
Yeah,
I mean, that was also like the consequence of them having played that format for so long too. Like I kind of forget how long 15 really ran for in Japan. But like it
Mhm.
had kind of multiple iterations too. They got like different sets of LM cards got released and things too. It was a weird deal.
yeah.
It
Especially if
almost
Um
they're speeding
yeah.
up for unification, I just don't see the point in them releasing a Japanese only ban list because we're gonna need whatever they hit sooner rather than later. Like, not having scrambles isn't gonna change the like card. I mean, if anything, it just makes the decks that are runaway strong right now run even stronger because it's harder to rebuild after they clear your whole shit.
Do you guys
yeah,
think that like we're getting a big ban list or a small ban list?
I'm so glad you asked this. I had a full-on conversation about this with Harry, friend of the show DHM. And I do not expect there to be a huge one this time. I know a lot of people want it to be full scorched earth, but I feel like we're probably like the biggest ban lists ever, are like the BT7 ones, and that was like MDF to zero, Eismon to one, or sorry, yeah, scatter mode to one, uh, Savior Hook, like what was it called, reinforced. Like they just hit a bunch of stuff in every color. I feel like we're probably looking at like some kind of complex ruling on Ukomon. Um, Maybe a nudge on a couple of the blue decks. Like I think the thing that's interesting is it'll be like how much of the variety are they hitting versus how much of the like the concentrated power stuff. Like because if you look at like the results here, other than GAO, which was eventually then won by Yellow Vaccine, and like that's probably a card that will get looked at, or a deck that will get looked at separately. Like overwhelmingly, like the converting stuff is like different colors of blue decks, like blue
Yeah.
green Imperial stuff. There's like blue red Galaxy Toolbox.
I
There's
think
like the kind of gotten out of hand for blue.
I think like the I'm going to assume that how typically we get a ban list like what every two ban lists a year or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
pattern.
I'm expecting this ban list to effectively last until like unification of the game. So I think like assuming that we know that BT 18 is a relatively low powered set except for like a couple cards. Like on paper that set is not super crazy, it just happens to buff one of the best decks right now.
There's like a couple things in 18 that like could get good with a ban list, but like right now
Yes,
you're 100% right.
exactly. And BT 19 looks promising along with like EXA. So I'm kind of expecting, like, assuming that these, as we're getting sort of like two sets revealed at once, I'm hoping that nothing is like game breaking in a sense of like, oh, this is like, I don't want another case of like a Nume or like recently what's like another deck that was like sort of like very dominant.
It'd
I
probably be
guess like
armor
Like the
vaccine, right?
winner after a ban list.
well, it would be like BT9 decks or like a crossheart. That was the example that I was looking for. Like as long as we don't get a Nume or a crossheart type deck where it's like, oh, this is just like so much better than everything else. And the next few sets are like decently powered. Like this balance could last us until unification.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I think the other thing that's interesting about like this year compares to almost like a lot of people have said this ban list is gonna have to do a lot like what BT12's one did, where it like prunes the bullshit. Like there's a lot of expectation that this is a ban list that is like it's less about like, oh, they hit Blossom on for future power design, but like Bloom wasn't necessarily the single best deck in the game, like the way that like Nume or Igaru are. Um, they just had to do that for like some game complex health for like design stuff.
It was also
I think
the
a lot of
support
the
coming out.
expectation. What'd you say, sorry?
It was also like because of this, like knowing what we know
Oh
now.
yeah,
Obviously, like the fact that plants got BT13 stuff and BT14 and
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Future design space was important. I'm like, that's all. That's the argument a lot of people make about Patamon. Like he's
Yeah.
gonna have to die at some point because he just restricts all of the vaccine stuff. But like,
And they can
there are
retrain him.
also parts of yeah, like I've seen a lot of people talk about like Padawan and the armors. It's like sure, like I think that's not a terrible idea, but like the problem is like they committed to making Angels, and like Angels is a real deck. Like
Mm.
in a world where it isn't like part of I've said on the show before, like I would love to see trainings all go. I think they're all really broken. Like I
I
think the
don't think
part
that's
of the problem with
happening.
yellow vaccine, I think part of the problem with yellow vaccine is that it's like they can find Awakening of the Golden Knight and like Veemon armor can't, and that's kind of stupid. Um, but like the other part of it is that like they've designed archetypes around having this little cheater Patamon SR that like they can't salvage without doing something drastic to, and it's like this is a mistake that they did the
So
same thing to Beelzemon where it was worse for a while. So
are we
maybe it's
doing?
time, but
Do we have like a page or whatever? So we for the watchers, we have like a visual indicator of the cards that we're adding to this like misplay for game ban list.
Yeah, this will be one of the few instances where dev is probably the best place to do this. So just
yeah,
But yeah, I think I agree with you, like in sense of like like also like with Beelzemon, I think that was a really good example because like I don't think Beelzemon, I think Beelzemon was a deck that was able to um like not suffer from its like bans too much because all they lost really was like the ability to it wasn't even a high roll at that point. That was just like you mill two,
yeah, that was just his expectation.
yeah, like Beel's like
You'd
turn
stack
50.
Impmons twice a turn.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, cool. This was a game that I played, so
Yeah.
I think you're right. But I
I
think
think
that
oh, go ahead.
no, no, no. I know what I want to talk about.
I was gonna
Like,
say then. I think one of the things that's interesting about like the idea that this ban list is like it's simultaneously a like how much are they gonna prune like the oppressive stuff? Because it's like the gap between the top tiers. You guys said it with Jambo the other day when you talked about the tier list. Is it was like the top five decks are like so much better than 6 through 10 that it's kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
is this the best where they do like maintenance on the game to prune that stuff like down to a normal level, or is this the ban list where they like, oh, we know what's coming in BT19 and BT20, like, so we're gonna make accommodation for that. Because
Like
it's like,
we want you guys to
yeah,
like play with these cards. Like please buy product.
exactly. It's like a whole thing. I also don't necessarily think that like they've printed like, a lot of people have mean things to say about specific parts of the game in the last year, like that, like, there's a group of Ace haters. There's people that think BT14 was a terrible set, like 15 was a terrible. There's it's been a contentious year for some of the design stuff since the new design team took over. I'm like, if you just look at the track record of EX5 cards that are on the ban list or that people want on the ban list, it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also, there's like parts of like the way that they've expanded the game is that things have like there is a larger variety and like good stuff now. Like I like to make fun of blue because it's just not my thing, but like
There's
you
like
know,
4
yeah,
viable blue decks. 5,
yeah,
sorry.
and they actually do different. Like yeah, they all end up swinging at you 7 times in one turn, but like
But
their
they're
entire game plan is different.
it's
Like
different. Yeah. That's a
yeah,
good point.
so like the game has kind of
I
more
would say
healthily like evolved.
2 of those decks share like a similar engine, but like they're still different decks.
Yeah, like even if you have the cards like in the archetype, like what you do with them is different. And like I think that's interesting. The other thing to talk about is like the Western perception versus the JP perception. This is probably the last ban list where we'll have to consider like is it a Western centric hit or an Eastern
Yeah.
centric hit and stuff like that.
Because
Which I
they've
think
gone
is
on
interesting.
record, which I think that was the thing that was quite concerning for us in the West is like when they did the official, it's like, oh yeah, these are like our top 3 decks, and Numeric is nowhere to be seen. And you got to wonder if the ban list has already been locked in, or after the more recent Gal results, where it's like, hey, yeah, dev team, 45% representation, Numemon. Maybe this should
Yeah.
have been on the top 3. Smile. Like, hopefully it's not like if they had a ban list, they're like, you know what, I got one more left in me.
Yeah, I think we can start
Yeah.
off with like Nume. We can just I have like a list of like decks, and we can kind of just go through them and like we can work
Yeah,
out
I'm
if they need a
I'm all
deck
for it.
a hit or not. We can, I don't think we're gonna get a massive ban list, but like we could talk about like cards that we expecting if they want to hit this deck. Like what card would they hit in that deck?
Yeah.
Um, I think the easiest deck to start off with is like Numemon. I think there's like 2 or 3 different ways you can hit Numemon relatively easily, and sort of like I think Numemon as a deck, if you think like about decks that had as long of a lifespan as Nume did, like Nume started off strong in like 15 as like a counter pick, and then it eventually became like a front runner of a format. Um, it was really good in 16. It was arguably one of the strongest decks in 16. EX6 still an amazing deck. BT17 we saw getting like second place at Gal Singapore, and even
Yeah.
now like sure it might not be the most like represented deck, but I think that's largely because I think hybrid formats tend to shift the meta game because
Yeah.
like if you like while Lumimon is a very good deck, hybrid decks demand that you deck build with them in mind because like they play sort of like almost on a different axis. Um, but the deck is still like amazing. It's just either JP players got bored or I don't know. But
They
if
like
you
new
I think the
choice.
format got worse for it in a weird way though. Like the thing that really pushes Numemon over the line for me is the like I think new like when you look at the format at like a surface level, you're like it's like 4 blue decks and Numemon. And Numemon on paper should have like it should be dead because blue bounce is the worst like thing for Numemon. Like it should not work in a format that is like this heavy on non-deletion removal, but like it consists of just enough pieces to restart over and over again that it will catch the other decks lacking where it does not, and that's how it makes its runs. Um, and so like objectively, I don't think it's like with the caveat being in the Eastern format, I don't think it's the strongest deck in the game anymore. But I think it's way too good for way too long. And like the problem with it is that if we are finishing the blue era and like we're going to Crossheart again now, um, this deck will still be as good as it is now, because like this is the floor. Like if it's playing against counter matchups all day, this is the worst Numan is gonna be. So they can't print new stuff without accounting for Numan anymore. So it's like they gotta take away some of its like infinite cheesiness. I
I
hope they kill all the Ugomons.
I think Andrew brought on all of the cards that I think are like
In
worth talking about
contention.
in contention. I think like whatever I mean, we can start off with the Yukos, right? I think that's like the easiest like thing to open our ban list with, and it's just like, what do we think is going to happen to the Ukos?
I think choice restrict
I
at
think
worst.
yeah, I think the slap on the wrist will probably be a choice restrict. I could see them hitting BT16 to 0. Between you, me, and the internet we're talking to, I think the rumor on the street is that there's a promo printing of one of the Ukomons coming out that has somewhat delayed reactions. Um, which, I'm not gonna attribute too much merit to stuff like that.
Please buy
Heard at
product.
events or whatever. Yeah, but if that is true, maybe there's something to be said for it. I just don't think these cards are like they enable. It's not just in this deck. Like we'll talk about Agaru and like red base piles later, but like the things that these cards do are too good together, and they're probably too good with certain eggs. Like I think we're kind of getting to the point where like Ukomon is worse than Patamon in the sense that it's restricting every other deck ever made, because it's like how far are we from like a Garurumon deck with no Gahumons? Like it can't be like forever away. So
Well,
there's
Well,
something to be said for
it's like the thing with like a Rurumon deck is that like you need the Gabumon to eventually like evolve over, right? But I think like the Ukomons are particularly powerful on like on your opener. They're sort of like great to open, like great to have in your opening hand, but sort of like assuming that you're using it as like a small amount. Like say for example, you're playing what's like okay like Gora, right? Like in deck store Gora, you want to open with Uko, but eventually you want to like do your things with the if you're playing Luga base or Black base or whatever, you want your Dorumon or your Lugamon. Um, and it's not a card that you want to draw into too much. Like you want to start seeing the rest of your deck. It's great to get you started, but eventually, like it's also not necessarily like a free check, but I think like it creates some pressure because it also gives you the ability to like hatch again to like oh if your hand is like semi stuck you just raise and then you hatch again and you go again and it's like well now I'm just cosplaying Rookie Rush for a little bit.
yeah, like
Um,
it's really not as restrictive as you would think. If you're happy to just go to 5 eggs, like it's in the same way that like old deck building, sometimes if you had 48 cards and you didn't know what to put in them post BT9, you throw 2 Death Eggs in and go, this will probably come up. Uko is the same sort of thing. It can either be the entire engine or it can just be like that little nitrous boost that you're just like, oh, I don't know what else to put, but like a card that either searches top 3 for whatever I need or a free memory extension because like it's not just the obviously red egg like Horomon is just best red draw egg. But if that Ukomon isn't going sideways, like the one of the things that makes Nume so difficult to deal with, in addition to having the search, is just it draws so much. Every Ukomon that doesn't get answered is a potential check, but it's also just a recurring draw battery because you're never evolving over it. So the Sunamon is always live. So
mhm.
it's
hmm
like I think it's restrictive in that way that you can just throw it in anything knowing that it can do something. At the very worst, it gets you 1 damage. At the very best, it gets you 1 damage plus extra.
I think it's
I
also
think the
like
other thing is like they break color identity too.
Mm.
Like I don't know why they chose white's thing. Like I
It was
don't
to
think
stop it from
whether or not you've
evolving.
seen the movie. Yeah, yeah, but whether or not you've seen the movie and understand that this thing represents like a digi egg cycle effect, like this is too much of like a thing. We know how much a hatched digi egg is worth. It's 4 from a Mimi. Like we
Well,
understand the condition. It's been in the game this whole time. Um,
Willis, it's 3 for
yeah, okay, sure, but
it's
you know what they're
one.
both are? Those are both green tamers.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said about the fact that like I am not gonna die on the hill for green here, but like don't you think it's weird that the best green deck is Patamon or sorry for yeah, Patamon Rapid Armor? Like if green's gimmick was egg manipulation to fight on the board and can maintain a body presence, like this deck just sort of invalidates that niche,
Yeah.
unless there are like, one of the hypothetical solutions to this is like an unlimited bloom pile where you can correctly make quantum, or sorry, not
Yeah.
quantum, ports fast enough to punish a wide board.
I
But
mean, it's
like,
an
why are
ancient
we
fairy as
unlimiting
well.
Bloom Lord to fix this?
I
Yeah,
th
it's stupid. Credson.
yeah.
I,
I have to run because our guest is here, by the way. Sorry,
Okay,
just got the
excellent.
text.
All right,
right.
Marcio,
Well,
So
get the rest of
you guys can wrap up your
I'll get the
thoughts.
rest
zoom
of the
through.
segment. Yeah. Okay. So I think when we look at Ukos, I think there's two outcomes that I. Oh damn, my voice is going.
He's
There are
choking.
two outcomes that I can envision happening. One outcome is they choice restrict them, and I don't think that's particularly better. Well, that's better than nothing, but I would want more than that because at that point, then we're just going to go back to sort of like BT15, where it was like, oh, now if they open the Uko is a higher roll as opposed to just like that's just part of their deck. The other outcome is they're both limited, and I would rather there only be like two Ukomons because then like if I mean it's still a high roll, but at least like
When
the
they're
high
gone,
roll
they're
is two
gone.
versus yeah, at least the high roll is 2 versus 4, right? Like I'll take that over 8. Um, in an ideal world, it would be like they would both get hit, like they would both get like limited, like banned, but it will probably be like both of them to one.
Yeah.
And then for Monza X, Numa X, it's weird because like if you think about like the DP minus for Nume, right? Like typically they have what the 3K from Monzai,
Yeah.
and then how much for Monza X? It's like 3 per
It's
guy, right?
two per guy, but
Oh,
uh,
two.
it's any time a guy is played for the first time. So it doesn't have to be by effect. It can just be like you can not have the X requirement and then just slam a rookie and it
Yeah.
fulfills the condition. I think it's every other. It's either every other or it's every card, but
So
it's
like what that means is that like typically by the time they make the Monza X, they'll have 2 extra Ukos out on the board because they eventually have to slam a Nume. So they'll have like Nume Monza X that will play out another body plus 2 Ukos. So assuming that the Monza evolved into from the previous Monza, that's a -3, and then they're also applying
minus
like
eight.
anywhere like yeah, like a -8. That's like -11 turn on turn 2. That's just like way too much. Now, if you force the deck to have to like evolve in the back, right? Like they're missing out on like tons of bodies, which means that like the DP minus is more like manageable. It becomes more of like oh, this means that they get like favorable blocks or like favorable ace interactions, as opposed to just like oh, they just nuke whatever I play out.
Yeah.
And then I don't know how I feel about Nume X. I feel like you can't take away both cards. I think Monza is the correct hit because like Nume X still lets the deck's still gives the deck its identity of like going into Platinum Nume, and I think that that's a important card for the deck to have post hit, like in an imaginary world where like Nume gets hit. I think like you need a way for them to bridge into their like strong cards, and it would maybe let the deck be like a combo pile in some way where like they set up and then like eventually they go wide or eventually they have like a crazy turn. But I'm not sure. What do you think?
I think a world where they don't hit the Ukos and they hit the Monzai X instead is like worst case scenario. Like I think that's the bad timeline where people go, "Oh, this is the card that like does a lot," and they shoot it when it's kind of like only egregious because of how fast they can swarm because of the other cards. So I wouldn't like to see Monzai X get hit in isolation. Like if like I hate the card, but I hate the card because of the things around it that enable it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't mind seeing it also get like capped, but I need it to also be getting capped rather than be the only thing that gets hit for the Nume core. Because most of the Nume cards are fine as a deck, but because they have access to 8 Ukos that just completely change like the play style and the speed of the deck, I just don't think that it can stay with all its current intended archetype support. We should be in a world where like Shinmonze should be a somewhat requisite part of the deck. I think another
Yeah.
thing also is like we kind of touched on it earlier with the choice restriction or like the ace haters. I think a choice restriction between Edamon and every ace not with Etemon in its name, I think would also be a fine hit for this deck because right now it is the best Etemon abuser. Just because obviously it can naturally evolve. Yes, you're paying 4, but it's a 4-cost Evo to blow up the board.
It's
And you can
also
find your pieces off of the Ukomons.
it's also insane that like the Garymon can pitch Edamons to pitch 1 draw 2. So like in cases where like your hand is like relatively stuck, it's still like half engine to your deck. Like there's still synergy regardless.
Yeah, so I wouldn't mind seeing a choice restriction between Etemon and Aces. Like, bare minimum is Uko needs to go, but like I then think the next Nume focused hit should be specifically another choice restriction that doesn't doesn't kill Sukamon to prevent Aces just being a wide thing, but that also fixes a lot of problems other people have with current Digimon, which is if you're playing black or yellow, you should be on any number of monkey plus ace.
We are gonna get snug in the bug and a rug in the
You know, it's gonna be something.
Yeah, that's probably
You wanna
our
get a bottle of
go-to.
water before we start? Apparently the
We'll
drinks are
do
free.
part
Oh,
2
shit.
some other time.
Yeah, we'll come back to this.
But yeah, thanks for the Boko. Members, apologies, this one isn't stupid early for champions, but it needs to come out topically. We'll get back to special
My
Boko
wife bought tickets to the new My Hero
soon.
Academia movie
Very
Oh,
soon.
yeah.
for 7.
Oh, right.